Imagine discovering that one of the most beloved animals in the entire Muslim world was also cherished by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, not just tolerated but deeply loved, respected, and even used as a living example of mercy. Picture this, a creature so small, often overlooked, padding silently through the Prophet's home and even his mosque, welcomed without hesitation. Why did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a time and place where animals were often neglected, choose to highlight kindness to cats in particular? What deeper truth lies beneath this love, a truth that would shape the behavior of an entire ummah for centuries? From the busy streets of Medina to modern homes today, this legacy has endured, quietly teaching us something profound about faith and humanity. And the answer, when revealed, will not only transform the way you see cats, but may even deepen your understanding of Islam itself. In the harsh deserts of 7th century Arabia, life revolved around survival. Water was scarce, food was precious, and compassion for animals was rare. Yet in this environment, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam emerged with a message of mercy so revolutionary that it extended not only to humans but to every living creature, including the smallest and quietest of animals, the cat. Unlike the dominant cultures of the time, where animals were used purely for work or disregarded altogether, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam demonstrated something different, a love rooted in recognition of their place in God's creation. He did not simply tell people to be kind, he lived that kindness, allowing it to flow naturally into daily life, into his interactions, into moments so subtle that even a sleeping cat could become a source of guidance for an entire community. What makes this love remarkable is not just that he cared for cats, but the way he redefined their presence in Muslim life. At a time when other animals were considered dirty or unworthy of closeness, cats were embraced, allowed to walk freely even in spaces of prayer. Their soft paws became a symbol of trust, their quiet companionship a reminder that faith is not only expressed in grand acts of worship, but also in small mercies, the way you treat what cannot speak for itself. This shift was profound, creating a ripple effect that continues to this day, where in countless Muslim households around the globe, cats are not merely pets, but honored members of the family. And this devotion traces directly back to the example set by the Prophet himself. One quiet afternoon, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam prepared for prayer, a small shadow slipped silently into the room. A cat, drawn by the calm presence of the Prophet and the serenity that seemed to fill the air around him, walked softly across the floor and curled up at his side. It wasn't planned. It wasn't staged, just a natural moment of creation meeting compassion. In that instant, something profound happened. The Prophet ﷺ didn't shoo the animal away, didn't see it as an inconvenience or impurity, but rather welcomed it with the same mercy he extended to every living thing. For those who witnessed it, the message was clear. Even the smallest creatures have a place in our hearts and in our faith. This wasn't an isolated incident. Cats were comfortable around the Prophet ﷺ because they sensed something most humans missed: the quiet kindness that radiated from him. They were drawn to his warmth, not fearful but trusting, knowing they would find safety at his side. And in these seemingly simple interactions, lessons unfolded that would ripple through generations. The Prophet ﷺ showed, without uttering a single word, that mercy is not reserved for people of status or power, but is due even to those who cannot speak, who cannot ask, yet still feel hunger, thirst, and comfort just as we do. This encounter was a silent sermon, one that reshaped how Muslims viewed animals forever. Perhaps the most famous story that illustrates this love happened one day when the Prophet ﷺ was resting, his robe draped loosely over him, when a cat climbed onto his garment and fell asleep on the sleeve. The call to prayer approached. He needed to rise, but rather than disturb the tiny creature's peaceful slumber, he did something that stunned those who saw it. He carefully cut the sleeve of his own robe, leaving the cat undisturbed. In that one quiet act, a universe of meaning unfolded. It was not about the robe. It was about choosing compassion over convenience, valuing life over material possession, and teaching through action rather than lecture. The companions who witnessed it understood immediately. No creature is too small to deserve mercy. Think about that moment for a second. In the middle of leading a community, guiding a new faith, carrying the weight of revelation, the Prophet ﷺ still found time to show patience and care for a tiny animal. It tells us something profound about priorities, that true greatness is measured not by how we treat those above us, but how we treat those below us, those who can give us nothing in return. That cut sleeve became more than a story. It became a legacy, passed down through hadith and remembered in every gentle stroke of a Muslim hand petting a cat to this very day. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ often reminded his followers that mercy is not optional, it is a measure of true faith. He said, "Whoever does not show mercy will not be shown mercy," and this principle extended to every living being under the heavens. Imagine hearing those words in a society where animals were frequently burdened beyond their strength, neglected, or even discarded when no longer useful. For the companions who witnessed his example, this teaching wasn't theoretical, it was lived, day after day, in small, ordinary moments that transformed hearts. The Prophet ﷺ saw acts of compassion not as trivial gestures, but as reflections of one's connection to Allah. When someone fed a hungry animal, he praised it. When someone deprived a creature of food or water, he warned them of divine accountability. This was radical, especially in an era when animals were often treated merely as tools. He was teaching that kindness to animals is kindness to oneself, a spiritual investment that earns reward in this life and the next. Among the animals most often seen around him were cats, creatures both graceful and unassuming. They wandered into homes, followed companions on their travels, and most notably, strolled freely into the Prophet's own mosque. Yes, imagine entering the sacred mosque in Medina, where prayers echoed and revelations descended, and seeing cats moving calmly among the worshippers. Their presence was not only tolerated, it was accepted, even welcomed. In Islam, purity is essential for prayer, yet the Prophet ﷺ made it clear, cats are neither impure nor harmful. This understanding elevated them above the misconceptions held by many other cultures of the time, and it laid the foundation for a tradition that continues to this day. Mosques around the world where cats are fed, cared for, and treated with dignity. The Prophet ﷺ even allowed cats to drink from the water used for ablution. This might surprise people who assume that sacred spaces must be rigidly separated from animals, but for the Prophet, mercy and cleanliness went hand in hand. He taught that the presence of cats does not invalidate prayer, does not corrupt purity, and does not obstruct worship. In fact, their quiet company added a sense of tranquility. Those who prayed beside them learned that compassion could coexist with devotion, and that reverence for God's creation was itself an act of worship. When companions saw this, they understood that Islam's teachings were not confined to rituals alone. The faith they were learning to live was holistic, guiding how they treated their families, their neighbors, strangers in need, and even the smallest of animals at their feet. Every moment with the Prophet ﷺ became a lesson, every gesture a reflection of divine mercy, every interaction with a cat a reminder that faith is expressed not only on prayer mats, but also in how gently we handle those weaker than us. And in that softness, they glimpsed the true heart of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also taught something remarkable that continues to surprise people even today. Cats are pure. In a faith where cleanliness is central to prayer and daily life, this was no small matter. He declared that cats are not impure, that their presence and even their drinking water does not harm the purity required for worship. Imagine the impact of this teaching in a world where animals were often viewed as dirty or burdensome. Suddenly, a creature so common, so overlooked, was recognized as clean, dignified, and welcome in the very spaces where believers met God in prayer. Cats roamed freely, walking across mats where companions stood shoulder to shoulder, sometimes curling up near them in quiet devotion of their own. And this was not considered a distraction, but a gentle reminder. In the sight of God, every creation has its place. One of the most beautiful proofs of this love is found in the life of Abu Huraira, one of the Prophet's closest companions. His real name was Abdurrahman ibn Sakhr, but no one called him that. The Prophet ﷺ himself gave him a nickname that would last forever, Abu Huraira, meaning father of kittens. He was rarely seen without a tiny cat nestled in his sleeve or carried gently in his hands. It wasn't mockery, it was affection, an acknowledgement of his tender heart toward these small creatures. And this nickname, given by the messenger of God, became a badge of honor, carried with pride through history. Abu Huraira went on to narrate more hadith than any other companion, and his love for cats remained a defining part of his character, a living testimony to how compassion and scholarship walked hand in hand. What's striking is how the Prophet ﷺ transformed ordinary moments into eternal lessons. In a time when strength was measured by power and dominance, he redefined strength as mercy, even toward the smallest of animals. By calling one of his most learned companions father of kittens, he elevated kindness to animals into something to be celebrated, not hidden. The companions learned through these stories that being close to God was not only about fasting and prayer, but also about how you treated the powerless, the hungry, the silent creatures who shared this world with you. And that understanding spread far beyond the Arabian desert, shaping generations of Muslims who would go on to care for cats as part of their daily lives. There is a reason the smallest moments often leave the deepest marks on the soul. A gentle gesture, a quiet act of compassion, can echo far louder than speeches or commands. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ understood this truth better than anyone. When he chose to cut the sleeve of his robe rather than wake a sleeping cat, he taught the world something far greater than kindness to an animal. He showed that mercy is not about convenience or recognition, it is about choosing care even when no one is watching. In that single act, the companions who stood nearby witnessed a living example of humility. The Prophet ﷺ, who led armies, received revelation, and was honored as the final messenger of God, did not see himself above serving the needs of the smallest creature. That story has endured for centuries because it carries a universal lesson. True greatness is not measured by how we treat those with power over us, but by how we treat those who have none. This small act became one of the most retold stories in Islamic tradition, not because of the cat itself, but because of what it revealed about the messenger's heart. It captured in one image the entire spirit of Islam: mercy, patience, and gentleness. The companions who saw it never forgot, and when they recounted the incident to future generations, it inspired them to mirror that same softness in their own lives. The Prophet ﷺ didn't deliver a lecture afterward. He didn't instruct them to write it down. He simply acted with compassion, and that was enough. In Islam, some of the greatest teachings are conveyed not by words, but by silent examples that sink into the heart and become part of one's character. Over time, these gentle interactions with cats became woven into the fabric of prophetic tradition. Multiple narrations describe cats calmly moving about the Prophet's home and even his mosque. They were not chased away or feared, but accepted as part of the environment of mercy he created. In some accounts, companions reported seeing cats drink from water set aside for ablution, and the Prophet ﷺ made it clear that this did not make the water impure. These narrations might seem simple on the surface, but their significance is immense. They shaped Islamic rulings on purity and paved the way for Muslims to coexist peacefully with animals in daily life. It is striking to realize that what the Prophet ﷺ modeled over 1400 years ago remains one of the most distinctive features of Muslim culture today. In many parts of the world, from Istanbul's mosques filled with friendly street cats to the quiet courtyards of North African madrasas, cats continue to roam freely, living proof of a mercy that refuses to fade with time. Their presence in sacred spaces serves as a reminder that Islam is not only about worship in isolation, but about harmony with the world around us. Even the smallest creature can reflect divine wisdom when treated with compassion. Before the coming of Islam, Arabia was a harsh land, not only in climate but in culture. Animals were often seen as mere property, valued only for the work they could do or the benefit they could provide. It was common to see creatures overburdened, neglected, or even mistreated without anyone raising a voice in protest. Mercy toward animals was not a virtue celebrated by society. It was almost unheard of. But then came the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, bringing with him a revelation that reshaped not only how people prayed, but how they lived, how they walked upon the earth, and how they treated every living soul they encountered. Through his example, kindness was no longer just a personal choice. It became a command from God, an obligation intertwined with faith itself. He reminded the people that all creatures form communities like their own, and that they, too, are part of Allah's creation, deserving of respect and compassion. This shift was revolutionary. Suddenly, the measure of piety was not simply found in prayer or fasting, but in how one treated the weak and voiceless. The Prophet ﷺ narrated stories of those who earned paradise for giving water to a thirsty dog, and warned of punishment for those who starved a cat to death. These examples shocked his listeners because they revealed something profound. Divine reward and punishment could hinge on how one treated even the smallest animal. In this new moral framework, mercy was no longer selective. It encompassed everything that breathed. And among all the animals in his care, the cat stood out as a quiet beneficiary of this prophetic compassion, its soft presence often gracing the spaces where revelation descended. But this teaching was not limited to cats alone. The Prophet ﷺ extended his mercy to birds, to camels, to even the humblest creatures crawling upon the earth. He taught his followers that life, in all its forms, is sacred. Once, upon seeing a bird distressed because someone had taken its chicks, he ordered that they be returned to their nest, showing that even a mother bird's feelings mattered in the sight of God. On another occasion, when he passed by a camel suffering under heavy weight, he ran his hand along its back and urged the owner to care for it properly, reminding him that these creatures are entrusted to us by Allah. Such moments were radical in their time, yet timeless in their wisdom, for they taught that no being is too small or too ordinary to deserve empathy. Through these lessons, the companions learned to view the world differently. They no longer saw animals as property alone, but as part of a divine trust. They began to feed the hungry, shelter the stray, and protect the vulnerable not for worldly praise but for the pleasure of God. And this ethic, born in the deserts of Arabia, would go on to influence Muslim civilizations for centuries, inspiring acts of care that continue to this day. In cities across the Muslim world, from Cairo to Istanbul, you will still find water bowls set out for stray animals and entire communities caring for cats, a living echo of prophetic mercy that refuses to fade with time. In the homes of the early Muslims, cats were not merely tolerated guests. They were beloved companions who moved freely among families, sharing in the warmth of daily life. It was not uncommon to see them resting in quiet corners of living spaces, slipping between rooms with graceful ease, or even joining meals without fear of being struck or shooed away. This acceptance came directly from the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who never once treated them as a burden or intrusion. Rather, their presence was woven into the rhythm of life, a constant reminder that every creature, no matter how small, is part of the same divine creation. Families would feed them from what little they had, not because they expected anything in return, but because they understood that providing for Allah's creatures was an act of worship itself. Over time, this simple generosity transformed into a cultural practice deeply rooted in the Muslim world, where cats are still fed and cared for in streets, courtyards, and mosques. A living legacy of prophetic mercy passed down generation after generation. But mercy, in Islam, is not merely a virtue to celebrate, it is also a test. The Prophet ﷺ warned his companions that neglecting or abusing animals could lead to severe consequences in the hereafter. One of the most sobering stories he told was of a woman who locked up a cat, neither feeding it nor allowing it to hunt for itself, until the animal died. The Prophet ﷺ revealed that this woman was punished for her cruelty, a chilling reminder that accountability before God extends even to how we treat the smallest of His creatures. For the companions, this story was shocking not because they doubted the importance of mercy, but because it shattered the belief that only human interactions mattered in divine judgment. If the fate of a person could change over a single cat, then every act of compassion or cruelty suddenly carried eternal weight. This teaching flipped the social order of the time on its head. People began to understand that righteousness was not measured by wealth, status, or even outward displays of piety, but by the quiet choices made in moments when no one was watching. Feeding a hungry animal became an act of worship. Offering water to a thirsty creature became a path to paradise. And harming a defenseless being became a warning sign of a hardened heart disconnected from the mercy of its creator. Through these lessons, the Prophet ﷺ instilled in his followers a profound awareness that every living thing, no matter how insignificant it might seem to us, holds value in the sight of God. Islam's message of mercy toward animals was not limited to simple affection. It was built upon the concept of rights and responsibilities that extended to every living being. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ often reminded his companions that even the animals under their care were trusts from Allah, beings with their own needs and sensitivities, deserving of fair treatment and protection. He taught that they must never be overworked, starved, or harmed unnecessarily. In one narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, "There is a reward for serving any living creature." These words redefined the relationship between humans and the natural world, turning what many viewed as ordinary interactions into opportunities for worship and reward. A simple act like feeding a stray cat or ensuring a thirsty animal had water suddenly became a doorway to God's mercy, an act recorded in the scales of good deeds. This teaching was transformative in a society where animals were often seen as expendable, shifting the mindset from ownership to stewardship, from dominance to compassion. The companions quickly learned that kindness was not optional, it was a measure of one's faith. They watched the Prophet ﷺ closely, noting how he treated animals gently, how he never raised a hand in anger toward them, and how he intervened when he saw cruelty. When they asked about what counted as righteous deeds, He did not limit his answer to prayer or fasting, but included caring for creatures that could neither speak nor defend themselves. This was revolutionary. It elevated simple, everyday choices into acts of devotion. The companions carried this ethic into their homes and into their dealings with others, creating a ripple effect that spread far beyond their generation. But these lessons weren't confined to animals alone. They were part of a broader teaching about the balance and harmony that Islam seeks to establish in all aspects of life. The Prophet ﷺ taught that mercy should extend in every direction to family, neighbors, strangers, and even those who wrong you, but he demonstrated that the measure of true mercy could often be found in how we treat those most vulnerable, those who cannot repay us, those who have no voice to ask for help. Cats, in their quiet presence and gentle nature, became a living reminder of this principle. Their acceptance in the Prophet's mosque, their safety in his home, and their care by his companions were all practical lessons in embodying compassion at every level of life. In every generation since, Muslims have inherited this legacy, whether consciously or not. The presence of cats in mosques, from Istanbul's Hagia Sophia to Morocco's ancient madrasas, isn't just a cultural quirk. It is a living sunnah, a thread that connects today's believers with the prophetic past. To see a cat curled up in prayer halls, undisturbed and at peace, is to witness a teaching that began in the Prophet's lifetime and endured for more than 14 centuries, a testament to the timelessness of mercy as a pillar of faith. Even centuries after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ left this world, the echoes of his teachings can still be felt in places of worship across the Muslim world. Step into a mosque in Istanbul or Cairo, and you may notice a quiet figure curled up in the corner, a cat resting peacefully, undisturbed by the flow of worshippers. This is not an accident or coincidence. It is a living reflection of prophetic mercy. From the earliest days of Islam, cats were welcomed into sacred spaces, their presence never considered an interruption but rather a reminder of the harmony between human devotion and the natural world. The Prophet ﷺ himself allowed cats to wander freely in the Mosque of Medina, drink from its water, and sit among those who prayed. In doing so, he shattered the belief that holiness requires separation from the living world, and instead taught that true faith integrates mercy into every corner of life. Imagine what it must have felt like for the companions to pray while a cat moved quietly between rows, occasionally brushing against their robes, never seen as unclean or unwelcome. This atmosphere of tranquility was unlike anything seen before, for it recognized the dignity of even the smallest creatures. The Prophet ﷺ never scolded them for allowing animals into a holy space. Instead, he set the example himself, proving that cleanliness and compassion are not opposites but can coexist in the purest acts of worship. This message remains profound even today, reminding us that the measure of piety is not found in rigid exclusion, but in a heart wide enough to embrace all of Allah's creation. Beyond their presence in the mosque, cats also held symbolic lessons for believers. Their quiet companionship and stillness mirrored qualities of patience and serenity that Islam encourages. A cat sitting calmly beside someone in prayer could serve as a silent reminder: slow down, breathe, find peace and stillness. The Prophet ﷺ embodied this calm in his own worship, and perhaps it is no coincidence that such tranquil creatures were drawn to him. For many Muslims throughout history, cats came to symbolize not just mercy, but also the kind of quiet humility that draws a person closer to God. In these moments, profound spiritual lessons emerge. Faith is not only about grand rituals, it is about the subtleties of character, how we act when no one is watching, how we care for what cannot repay us, how we honor the smallest aspects of creation as signs pointing back to the Creator. A cat resting in the Prophet's mosque may seem insignificant to outsiders, but for those who understand, it is a visible sign of Islam's revolutionary approach to mercy, a faith that integrates devotion to God with kindness toward everything He made. And when believers carry this lesson forward, they transform not only their places of worship, but their entire way of seeing the world around them. Over 14 centuries have passed since the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ walked the earth, yet the compassion he showed to animals, especially cats, continues to resonate deeply in the hearts of believers. This unbroken chain of mercy can be seen in countless small acts across generations: a bowl of water placed outside a home for strays, a mosque courtyard where cats are fed by worshippers, a quiet hand reaching out to stroke a hungry animal without expecting anything in return. These actions are not random. They are rooted in a prophetic legacy that transformed cultural norms and planted seeds of kindness that have flourished across continents. Wherever Muslims traveled, whether to the streets of Damascus, the markets of Baghdad, or the ports of Zanzibar, they carried this ethic with them, creating communities where animals were not driven away but welcomed, protected, and loved. This legacy stands in stark contrast to what existed before Islam. In pre-Islamic Arabia, animals were often left to suffer under heavy loads or neglected without guilt. It was a society where mercy toward the powerless was rare and often seen as weakness. Yet the Prophet ﷺ flipped this mindset on its head, teaching that mercy was not weakness but strength, not an optional kindness but a requirement of faith. He taught that Allah rewards every act of compassion, no matter how small, even something as simple as offering water to a thirsty cat or moving gently so as not to disturb it in its sleep. This teaching spread far and wide, changing not only how animals were treated, but how humanity itself was understood. One of the profound distinctions the Prophet ﷺ made was between cats and other animals, particularly dogs. While Islam encourages kindness toward all creatures, certain rulings regarding ritual purity made dogs less likely to be present in prayer spaces. Cats, however, were given a unique place declared pure and permitted even in sacred areas. This clarity allowed them to coexist comfortably within homes and mosques, bridging the worlds of worship and daily life in a way few other animals could. Their gentle nature and clean habits made them ideal companions, but beyond practicality, their presence carried symbolic meaning, a reminder that the mercy of Islam permeates every aspect of existence, from the grandest rituals to the quietest moments of daily living. The Prophet's companions embraced this teaching fully. Many became known for their kindness to animals, and entire communities followed suit. Over time, Muslim cities became renowned for their care of strays. Historical records describe charitable endowments established specifically to feed and protect animals. In Ottoman Istanbul, for example, special stone water fountains were built with basins at ground level for cats and dogs. In Fez, Marrakesh, and Cairo, residents left food on rooftops and courtyards for wandering cats. These were not isolated acts, but living reflections of the Prophet's teachings, carried forward by generations who understood that to honor creation is to honor the Creator. The love that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ showed for cats was never separated from his devotion to Allah. It was not simply sentiment or personal preference. It was an act of worship, a reflection of the very mercy that defined his message. When the Prophet ﷺ treated animals gently, when he allowed cats to drink from the same water used for prayer or to rest in the sacred spaces of worship, he was teaching a deeper truth, that mercy to creation draws you closer to the Creator. The companions understood this. They realized that every act of kindness, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, could transform into a form of dhikr, a remembrance of God. To feed a hungry cat was not merely charity, it was a way to polish the heart, to cleanse the soul, to live the values that Islam calls believers to embody. This understanding was radical for its time and remains powerful even now. Many people assume spirituality is limited to ritual, that worship ends when prayer concludes. But the Prophet ﷺ shattered that narrow view. He showed that the ethics of Islam flow into every corner of life: how you speak, how you trade, how you treat neighbors, and even how you treat the smallest animal crossing your path. The love for cats in particular demonstrated a remarkable balance, a creature that could live freely, needing little care, yet still receiving abundant kindness from believers who saw their care as a path to divine reward. This transformed mundane acts, offering food, sheltering an animal from the heat, allowing a cat to rest undisturbed, into acts with eternal significance. For the modern believer, these lessons remain as urgent as they were 14 centuries ago. In a world where cruelty to animals is widespread and compassion is often dismissed as weakness, the Prophet's example is a reminder that mercy is strength, that gentleness is power, and that true piety is proven not only in the mosque, but in every interaction we have with the world around us. The presence of cats in Muslim homes and mosques today is not just tradition, it is testimony, a living sunnah that continues to invite people to reflect on the deeper meaning of mercy. And beyond the gentle presence of cats lies an even broader call, a call to examine how we treat every vulnerable being around us. The Prophet ﷺ did not limit compassion to animals alone. He urged believers to extend mercy to the orphan, the widow, the oppressed, and the stranger. But through his tenderness toward cats, he gave us an enduring symbol that even the most ordinary creature can become a mirror reflecting divine love. When a believer bends to feed a stray cat, when a worshiper pauses to protect a small creature from harm, they are not just performing kindness. They are reviving the example of the messenger and living out the very heart of Islam. Reviving the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ compassion toward animals is more than preserving a memory. It is a forgotten sunnah waiting to be brought back into daily life. In an age where cruelty can spread so easily and neglect often goes unnoticed, even the simplest acts of mercy can become powerful forms of worship. The Prophet ﷺ showed us that caring for cats, feeding them, sheltering them, protecting them, is not a small matter. It is a reflection of the faith beating inside a person's chest. To feed a hungry animal is to feed a creation of Allah. To protect them from harm is to honor the trust of being Khalifa, stewards of the earth. Every time a believer bends down to pour water for a thirsty creature or leaves scraps for a stray cat, they are not just showing kindness, they are walking the path of the Prophet ﷺ, living proof that mercy is not an abstract concept but a way of life. This legacy is not confined to dusty books of hadith or distant memories of the companions. It lives wherever believers choose to act on it. Across the Muslim world, mosques and neighborhoods that welcome cats keep this tradition alive without even realizing it. In Istanbul, it is common to see street cats strolling calmly through prayer halls, greeted with affection rather than scorn. In Morocco and Egypt, bowls of water are placed at mosque doors for animals passing by. In countless homes, families share their food with strays because they understand that even this small gesture carries weight with Allah. Such actions may seem insignificant to outsiders, but in the eyes of God, they can tip the scales of mercy on the day of judgment. At the same time, reviving this sunnah challenges believers to see past myths and misconceptions. Some cultures have adopted unfounded beliefs about animals being unclean or burdensome, but the Prophet's teachings shatter these ideas. He clarified that cats are pure, that their presence does not harm worship, and that kindness toward them and toward all animals is part of true piety. Reclaiming this understanding is more than just caring for cats. It is about reclaiming the heart of Islamic mercy itself. For when people live with compassion toward those who cannot speak for themselves, they begin to cultivate compassion in all areas of life toward their neighbors, their families, and even their enemies. These reminders are crucial today, when the world can feel increasingly harsh and divided. Acts of mercy have the power to soften hearts, to heal divisions, and to remind humanity of its higher calling. Every time someone chooses to show kindness to a small, voiceless creature, they affirm a truth the Prophet ﷺ lived by, that Allah's mercy is vast, encompassing everything, and those who reflect even a fraction of it are walking closer to Him. The reason Prophet Muhammad ﷺ cherished cats was never about the animals alone. It was about what their care revealed in the human heart. In the quiet moments when he allowed a cat to drink from his water or sleep on his robe, the world was witnessing something far greater than affection. It was seeing the embodiment of divine mercy expressed in human form. The Prophet ﷺ understood that faith is not only about prayer and fasting, but about carrying that faith into every interaction, especially with those who cannot defend themselves, cannot repay kindness, cannot even speak to ask for it. By honoring cats, he was teaching us how to honor creation, and by extension, how to honor the Creator. This truth remains as powerful today as it was 14 centuries ago. When a believer feeds a stray cat on a street corner, shields an animal from the heat of the sun, or allows a creature to find rest without disturbance, they are not just performing a kind act, they are reviving a sunnah, breathing life into a legacy of compassion that the Prophet ﷺ himself lived. In a time when cruelty toward animals is common and mercy is often forgotten, these small acts become radical reminders of what it truly means to follow His path. They turn everyday moments into opportunities for worship, opportunities to draw nearer to Allah, opportunities to reflect the mercy that the Prophet ﷺ carried into every corner of his life. And perhaps this is why his love for cats continues to inspire millions around the world. It is not because they are beautiful or graceful, though they are, but because in them we find a test of our own hearts. How do we treat what gains us nothing in return? How do we show mercy when no one is watching? How do we honor God's creation when it cannot thank us for it? The Prophet ﷺ answered these questions not with lectures, but with actions. He did not shun the smallest creature, nor did he consider its needs beneath him. He showed that to care for even the most ordinary part of creation is to align oneself with the extraordinary mercy of God. This is the true reason he cherished them. Because every living thing, from the greatest of angels to the smallest of animals, exists by the will of Allah, and to show mercy to them is to honor the one who created them. And when we choose to follow that example, when we open our hands to feed, when we soften our steps to protect, when we let a small creature find safety by our side, we are not just loving a cat. We are following the path of the messenger, walking a road of mercy that leads us closer to paradise.